I swear to God, the day I saw my son standing there, right at my doorstep, the look on his face, oh, good heavens, my heart nearly leapt right out of my chest. And why, you ask? Because just a few days prior, I'd told him a bald-faced lie, a lie that still makes my ears burn when I think about it. I told him my pension was only $1,000 a month, when the truth, the whole, unvarnished truth, was 3 times that. A devious old man, that's what I was, a cunning old fox. That day the Saigon sun was beating down, hot enough to melt asphalt, but somehow my insides felt cold, shriveled up. Sitting there in my tiny living room, the ceiling fan whirring like a dizzy bird, it couldn't stir away the nagging dread. The sound of motorbikes outside, a constant, buzzing hum, was just like the thoughts rattling in my head, chaotic, no clear path forward. Then came the knock, soft, hesitant, but it made me jump. And when the door swung open, there he was. My son, that little cootie who used to fit in the crook of my arm, now a towering man, burdened with bags. Do you want to know what happened after that outright lie? What my son did that day that utterly shocked me to my core? Lean in closer, because this story, my friend, is one you won't forget. You see, it wasn't out of malice. No, never malice. It was a father's foolish pride, a twisted kind of love, I suppose. Or maybe, just maybe, a sliver of fear. The fear of becoming a burden. The fear that in my old age, I'd be just another mouth to feed, another worry line on my son's already tired face. He's a good boy, my son. Works hard, always has. But life has a way of throwing wrenches into the best-laid plans, doesn't it? He just started his own little venture, something about online sales, always glued to that phone of his. And I knew, deep down, he was struggling. He wouldn't say it, not directly, but a father knows, you see. You feel it in your bones when your child is carrying a heavy load. So when he called, his voice tired but trying to sound cheerful, asking, "How's retirement treating you, Dad? Enough to get by?" That's when the words just tumbled out. Oh, just 1,000. Enough for rice and a few vegetables, no need to worry about this old man. My voice, it was too steady, too convincing. I almost believed it myself. I remember holding that old rotary phone, the plastic warm against my ear, listening to the silence on the other end. A long, drawn-out silence. And then a quiet, "Oh, I see, Dad," just that. No more questions, no protestations. It was too easy. And that, my friend, was when the dread truly began to gnaw at me. I wanted to see. I needed to know if his filial piety, that deep-rooted respect and care for his parents, was as strong as I always believed it to be, even when tested. And believe me, this test, it was harsher than I ever intended. What followed wasn't what I expected. Not at all. And it led directly to that moment at the doorstep, a moment that would forever change the way I looked at my son and at myself. This isn't just a story about a lie, It's about unspoken burdens, about a son's silent sacrifices, and a father's overwhelming regret. It's about how the simplest deception can unravel into something far, far greater than you ever imagined. So, if you're ready to peel back the layers of this complicated family drama, to witness the shocking truth and the beautiful, heartbreaking revelation that unfolded, then stay with me. This is just the beginning. My deepest apologies. You are absolutely right. I got carried away with the narrative flow and completely missed the instruction to switch back to English. Thank you for catching that. Let's rewrite that entire development and building suspense section in English, with all the detail, emotional depth, colloquialisms, exclamations, and descriptive adverbs you asked for. My sincere apologies for the oversight. I'm telling you, straight up, after that fateful phone call, the one where I accidentally blurted out that damn $1,000 pension figure, the atmosphere between me and my son it got weird. Not angry, mind you. Absolutely not. It was just a very subtle silence, a sudden void that appeared in conversations that used to be lively, carefree. My son, he'd still call regularly, still ask, "Dad, have you eaten yet? How's your back feeling?" The exact same familiar questions, but there was something in his voice that had changed. A deeper, heavier tone. He no longer had that eager, unburdened cheerfulness he usually did. You know, worry doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it just sits quietly in a prolonged yeah, a very soft sigh that you can feel through the phone line. Oh my goodness. Just hearing it was enough to make my heart ache. Before, he used to swing by every other week, sometimes just for a quick cup of tea, sometimes bringing a bag of fresh fruit or some fancy coffee. But after that phone call, his visits became less frequent. When he did come, his eyes would linger more intently, more silently as he looked around my room. The stained ceiling, the small cracks on the walls, or that ceiling fan spinning sluggishly as if it were about to fall off. He wouldn't say a word, just that look, that pensive gaze alone was enough to make me, this old man, feel truly guilty, truly more pitiful than ever, just like the play I'd written and directed myself. Good heavens! Every single one of his glances was like a needle pricking straight into my conscience. Then, the little things started. The kind of little things that, when strung together, form a clear, undeniable pattern. My son, who used to be so meticulous about his appearance, always neat and presentable, now I'd see him repeatedly wearing the same faded t-shirts, the same worn-out jeans I knew he'd had for years. You know, he was a huge coffee lover, had to be that aromatic imported stuff. But one day, I passed by the small roadside stall at the end of the alley, and I saw him sitting there, solitary, huddled by himself, sipping a glass of ice-cold plain iced tea, his face looking visibly haggard. Oh, for crying out loud! That sight, just looking at him, made my heart ache immeasurably. The phone calls from his friends, inviting him out, those lavish gatherings he used to brag about, now they'd vanished. I'd ask casually, "Still going to that new restaurant with your friend's son?" He'd just shake his head lightly, an almost imperceptible shake, then say, "Too busy, Dad. Business is picking up, got a lot to do." He was already a workhorse, working like an ox, but now he seemed to be utterly draining his energy. His eyes, already tired from staring at screens all day, had a new kind of weariness, a deeper, darker shadow beneath them. I'd often hear the clacking of his keyboard from his room, stretching late into the night. Then some nights, I'd wake up to use the restroom, and I'd catch the faint smell of instant noodles wafting from his room. Instant noodles, mind you. Not those proper, well-prepared meals from before. It was as if every spare moment, every spare penny he earned was being funneled into a single purpose. Something I couldn't quite fully grasp, but deep down, I knew for sure, it had something to do with me. Absolutely. You see, when I concocted that lie, my cunning old mind had already cooked up a few scenarios. Maybe he'd just sigh, tell me to take care, and send me a little extra pocket money each month. Or at most, he'd suggest I move in with him, a thought that both filled me with a strange dread and an unusual longing. But I never, ever imagined this scene. This quiet, almost resigned self-sacrifice. He wasn't just simply offering help anymore. He was transforming himself into that help, through his own painful renunciations, his own austere cutbacks. He started bringing groceries, not the usual treats or delicious cakes, but just the bare essentials: a big bag of rice, a few kilograms of perfectly fresh fish, a bunch of vibrant green vegetables. "Dad, these were on sale," he'd say, deliberately avoiding my gaze. But I knew he was pinching pennies, saving every bit, tightening his belt bit by painful bit, all because of that $1 million pension I'd invented. Oh, heavens above! That sight, watching him, it just pained me to no end. And with each faded t-shirt, each missed outing with friends, each heavy sigh of his, a cold knot of guilt tightened relentlessly in my stomach. The test I had set up, this mischievous game, was now turning into something far grander, far more agonizing than I had ever intended. It wasn't just about his reaction anymore. It was about my reaction to his reaction. And the sight of his silent struggle was slowly, painfully, eroding the elaborate lie I had constructed so carefully for so long. I began to feel not just regret, no, but a chilling fear creeping in. Fear of what this seemingly harmless lie was doing to my son, and fear of what he might do next. Because a son who would sacrifice his own comfort like this, based on a half-truth, was capable of anything. Truly anything, just to make sure his old man was taken care of. Absolutely unbelievable. The weight of it just kept pressing down on me more and more each day, growing heavier and heavier with every breath. My carefree, leisurely life, now it felt like a blatant betrayal. Every time I reached for a small luxury, a better brand of tea, a little snack, I'd see his clearly visible, tired face, his strict choices, and that little pleasure would turn to ash in my mouth. I was watching my lie, like a tiny seed, now sprout into a tall, sturdy tree, something that would likely overshadow both of us. And soon, very soon, that growth would reach a point where it could no longer be hidden. A point where a quiet act of love would demand a startling and undeniable response. The apprehension, it had been a constant, gnawing companion for weeks now. Every creak of the gate, every shadow at the window made my old heart jump. I knew, deep down, something big was brewing, something tied to my foolish lie. And then, one sweltering afternoon, just as the sun was baking the life out of the alley, it happened. I was pottering about in the kitchen, pretending to clean, but really my mind was miles away, wrestling with my guilt. Suddenly I heard it, not the usual light knock. No, this was a firmer, more deliberate series of raps on the door. It wasn't impatient, but it carried a weight. A weight that instantly told me, this is it. My hands, they started to tremble uncontrollably, spilling a few grains of rice onto the counter. I wiped them away hastily, but my legs felt like jelly as I shuffled towards the front door. And there he stood, my son. Not with a small bag of groceries this time, or just his usual worn backpack. No, he was holding something big, something bulky, wrapped in layers of brown paper and secured with thick twine. His face, though still tired, had a strange mix of resolute determination and, well, something akin to humble pride. He looked at me, not with pity, but with an intense, unwavering gaze that pierced right through me. My heart thumped against my ribs frantically like a trapped bird. Oh, good heavens, what now? He stepped inside, the large package almost dwarfing him, and carefully, so carefully, placed it down on my rickety old coffee table. He didn't sit down, just stood there looking at me, that same unreadable expression on his face. "Dad," he began, his voice a little strained, a little rough, I know you said your pension was 1,000. And I've been thinking a lot about it." My blood ran cold. Oh God, he knows. That was my immediate, horrifying thought. He'd found out. my lie exposed. But then he continued, and what he said next, it hit me like a physical blow. "It's not enough, Dad," he said, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. "It's barely enough to live on, and I couldn't stand seeing you struggle, so I took a loan." My eyes widened, shocked. "A loan for what?" "I sold my motorbike, Dad," he went on, almost matter-of-factly, "the one I worked so hard to buy. And I used that money, combined with some savings and a small loan from a close friend, to buy this." He started gently tearing away the brown paper, and as the layers peeled back, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't money. It wasn't a new appliance. It was a rice cooker. A brand new, gleaming, top-of-the-line rice cooker. And next to it, carefully nestled, was a large, heavy bag of premium, fragrant rice. And then he pointed to a smaller, neatly wrapped package. "And this, Dad," he said, a faint, almost shy smile touching his lips, "is a medical insurance policy. A good one, for you, so you won't have to worry about hospital bills anymore." My God, my world spun. He sold his beloved motorbike, the one he cherished, the one that got him everywhere, the symbol of his independence. He took out a loan, all for a rice cooker and a health insurance policy for me, just because I, this deceitful old fool, had told him I was destitute. A wave of nausea washed over me, overwhelmingly. The shame, the guilt, the sheer, unbearable weight of his sacrifice, it crushed me. My eyes blurred instantly with hot, stinging tears. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I just stood there, rooted to the spot, staring at the rice cooker, at the bag of rice, at the insurance policy, symbols of a love so pure, so unconditional, it utterly shattered my manipulative heart. What had I done? My stomach twisted violently. This wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't the test. This was a testament to a love I didn't deserve. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The words, they clawed their way up my throat, desperate to be free. My voice, when it finally came out, was a ragged whisper, broken and trembling violently. "Son," I choked, reaching out a hand, my fingers quivering. He looked at me, his brow furrowed with concern. "Dad, what's wrong? Are you crying?" I lied to you, son," I sobbed, the tears now streaming freely down my wrinkled cheeks, burning a path. "My pension, it's not 1,000. It's 3,000. It's always been 3,000. The air in the room seemed to freeze. The ceiling fan, which had been whirring lazily, suddenly sounded like a roaring beast in the stark silence. His eyes, just moments ago filled with gentle concern, now widened, slowly, painfully, as the truth sunk in. The smile, that rare, shy smile, vanished from his lips. For a long, agonizing moment, he said nothing. His face, usually so expressive, was now a mask of, I don't know what, disbelief, hurt, betrayal. Oh God, I'd broken him. The silence stretched, unbearably long, filled only by my ragged breathing and the thumping of my own guilty heart. I watched him, agonizingly, waiting for the explosion, the anger, the accusation. But it never came. Instead, a different emotion, something I hadn't expected, began to surface in his eyes. Something profoundly complex. It was then, in that gut-wrenching silence, that I truly understood the depth of the chasm I had dug between us with my foolish pride. The raw, immediate shock of my confession hung heavy in the air, a palpable weight between us. The peak of the storm had passed, but the aftermath, the stunned silence, was perhaps even more unnerving. It was in this quiet, this unbearable stillness, that the true gravity of my actions began to settle, not just on me, but on him too. The tears still streamed down my face, hot and shaming, but his gaze, though wounded, held something else now. Something that hinted at a path forward, albeit a difficult one. a path towards understanding, perhaps even forgiveness. But first, we had to navigate this uncharted territory of truth. The silence that followed my confession, oh, the sheer, crushing weight of it. It wasn't just a lack of sound. It was a physical presence, a thick, suffocating blanket woven from my guilt and his unspoken hurt. Every tick of the old wall clock sounded like a booming gong in my ears. I could feel my pulse throbbing erratically in my temples, a frantic drumbeat against the unbearable stillness. My gaze was fixed on the worn-out patterns on the floor tiles, desperately avoiding his eyes, convinced I'd see only condemnation, only revulsion. But then, slowly, incredibly slowly, he moved. He didn't storm out, didn't raise his voice, didn't even flinch away. Instead, he took a step closer, then another, until he was standing right in front of me. And when I finally dared to lift my gaze to meet his eyes, I saw it. Not the explosion I so painfully anticipated. No. What I saw was a profound, deeply etched sadness, yes, but interwoven with an understanding so vast, so unfathomable, it utterly took my breath away. There was no anger, no fury, just a quiet, almost tender sorrow. Good heavens, how could he be so incredibly forgiving? It was a look that spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement of my folly, and somehow a reaffirmation of his love despite it. And then his voice came softly, almost reverently, cutting through the thick air like a fragile yet persistent ray of light. "Dad, why?" Just that one word, that single, heart-wrenchingly simple question, uttered without a hint of accusation, just pure, unadulterated bewilderment and pain. That why shattered whatever was left of my carefully constructed facade. And it all came pouring out of me then, a torrent of shame, regret, and the convoluted fears that had led me down this wretched path. The fear of being a burden, a useless old man. The utterly foolish pride that made me want to test his love to see if it was conditional. The desperate longing to feel independent, even as my body betrayed me. I rambled, hastily, desperately trying to explain the twisted logic of my heart, the decades of unspoken anxieties that had finally manifested in this cruel deception. My voice was a ragged, trembling mess, thick with tears that streamed unabatedly down my wrinkled cheeks, burning a hot path. But I kept going, doggedly, trying to empty my soul, to lay bare every ugly corner of my reasoning. And he just listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't fidget, didn't even blink. Just stood there, immovably patient, his gaze steadfastly fixed on mine, absorbing every painful, broken word. It felt like an eternity, that agonizing confession, that raw outpouring of my wretched heart. And then, when I finally ran out of words, out of breath, there was another silence. A different kind of silence this time. A kinder, a more understanding silence. A silence that felt like a quiet, unspoken embrace, gently wrapping around my shattered self. Oh, the sheer relief, the lightness that slowly, miraculously, began to bloom within my chest. He then did something so simple, yet so profound. He walked over to me slowly, deliberately, and placed a hand on my shoulder. His touch was gentle, reassuring, not a reprimand but a silent solace. "Dad," he said, his voice now calm, steady, infused with a maturity I hadn't fully recognized until that moment. "I understand, I really do." And in that very instant, I knew with every fiber of my being. He wasn't just saying it to make me feel better. He did understand. He understood the clumsy, misguided love that lay beneath my elaborate deception. He saw through the ugly lie to the terrified old man beneath. My God, what a son. What an incredible, truly magnificent human being I had raised. He looked at the new rice cooker, then at the meticulously wrapped insurance policy, tangible proofs of his sacrifice. Dad, he continued, a faint, wistful smile now gracing his lips, a smile that held a touch of sadness but also immense warmth. It doesn't matter how much your pension is. What truly, deeply matters is that you're my dad. And I want to take care of you. This, he gestured vaguely at the gifts, this is nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to what you've done for me throughout my entire life. His words, so beautifully simple, yet profoundly impactful, cut deeper than any accusation ever could. They pierced through the thick layers of my guilt and landed straight in the core of my being, filling me with a staggering sense of both shame and an overwhelming, almost unbearable love. I realized, then and there, the utter futility, the tragic absurdity of my lie. Honesty, even if it brings initial discomfort or reveals vulnerability, builds a foundation of true trust, a fortress of genuine connection. My lie, born of a twisted, protective affection, had nearly shattered that very foundation. His love, his unconditional acceptance of my flawed, imperfect humanity, was the true treasure. I had tried to test him with a deception, a cold calculation, and he had responded with a truth so pure, so utterly selfless, so miraculously profound, that it shamed me into a raw, complete honesty. What an epiphany! What a powerful, life-altering lesson! A lesson learned through torrents of tears, through bitter regret, and through the beautiful, unwavering, unquestioning devotion of my own flesh and blood. Never again. I vowed silently, never again would I allow fear or misguided pride to taint the precious bond we shared. We talked for a long, long time after that, quietly, sincerely, letting the last vestiges of the storm dissipate. Not just about money anymore, but about life itself, about our hidden worries, about our long-forgotten dreams. He told me about his struggles with his fledgling business, the sleepless nights, the setbacks, the things he'd always valiantly kept hidden to spare me, to keep my old mind at ease. And I listened, truly listened, for the first time in ages, not as a father trying to test his son, but as a man finally seeing his adult child, fully grown, with his own complex burdens, his own silent battles. The words flowed between us, unhindered, bridging the gap my lie had created. Later that evening, with the sun gently setting and casting long, golden shadows across my small home, he insisted on cooking. Just a simple meal. Fluffy, aromatic rice from his new cooker, a few perfectly stir-fried vegetables, and a modest portion of braised pork. Nothing fancy, no elaborate feast, but it was by far the most delicious, most comforting meal I'd had in years, perhaps in decades. We sat at my small, worn table, the very same table where I'd often sat alone, brooding over my silly test, feeling isolated by my own deceit. But tonight, it felt profoundly different. The air was lighter, cleaner, infused with the warmth of genuine connection. The silence wasn't strained anymore. It was comfortable, warmly intimate, punctuated only by the soft clinking of chopsticks and the occasional contented sigh. He served me the rice, gently, reverently, making sure my bowl was generously full. And as I ate, savoring every single grain, I looked at him, truly looked at his face, no longer clouded by my deception, but simply present, simply real. He caught my eye, and for the first time since that fateful phone call, a genuine, unforced smile, so beautifully pure, touched his lips. It was small, almost shy, but it reached his eyes, crinkling them at the corners. And in that precious moment, I saw not just my son, but my friend, my confidant, my anchor in a turbulent sea. Ah, the pure, unadulterated joy of it. That simple, shared meal was more valuable, more profoundly meaningful than all the money in the world. That night, as he finally left, with the stars beginning to pepper the velvet sky, the silence he left behind wasn't heavy anymore. It was filled with a newfound peace, a profound sense of understanding and acceptance that had replaced the gnawing guilt. The lie, though confessed and forgiven, would always be a part of our story, a deep, indelible scar, a stark reminder of how easily good intentions can go horribly awry. But more importantly, it became the crucible through which the true, unbreakable, eternally precious bond between a father and son was forged, stronger and more beautiful than ever. And as I drifted off to sleep, feeling profoundly content, the soft, steady hum of the new rice cooker, his selfless gift, was the sweetest lullaby, a tangible testament to a love that had truly, miraculously, passed the ultimate unintended test, emerging not just intact, but gloriously triumphant. And so, my friends, my dear, patient listeners, that's my story. That's the raw, unvarnished truth of a foolish old man's clumsy deception, a truth that crashed head-on with a son whose love proved to be infinitely, miraculously more profound, more selfless, than I could have ever possibly conceived in my wildest, most cynical dreams. Looking back now, from the quiet, almost serene comfort of my little house, where the gentle, rhythmic hum of that precious rice cooker is a constant, soothing reminder, I realize so many things. Oh, the revelations that have blossomed in this old heart. You see, sometimes we parents, in our deeply flawed, often misguided attempts to protect our children from the harsh realities of life, or perhaps, shamefully, to test the very depths of their affection, or even just out of sheer, stubborn pride that prevents us from admitting weakness, we make monumental mistakes. We erect invisible walls of silence, or worse, insidious walls of deception, thinking naively that we're doing what's best, that we're somehow shielding them or ourselves. But what I learned, painfully, agonizingly, and then so beautifully, is that the most solid, unshakable foundation for any family, for any genuine human relationship, is built on truth. Not some sugar-coated version, not a convenient half-truth, but raw, unvarnished truth. Because even when that truth is difficult, even when it exposes our flaws, our insecurities, our very human vulnerabilities, it is always, always the only authentic path to genuine understanding, to a bond that can withstand the fiercest gales, the most devastating storms. What an undeniable, life-altering epiphany that was. My eyes, they were truly, irrevocably opened. My son, oh, my incredible son, he didn't just forgive me in the superficial sense. He understood me. He peered unwaveringly past the layers of my clumsy lie and saw the fear, the desperate love, the sheer human frailty that drove me to it. And in that act of pure, unconditional acceptance, an acceptance so vast it felt like the entire ocean, he didn't just mend a broken trust. He didn't just patch up a tear. No, he forged something entirely new, something incredibly precious and utterly unbreakable. That scar of deception, yes, it's still there, a faint, almost ethereal mark on our shared history. But it's not a wound anymore. It's not a source of pain. It's a constant, humbling reminder. A reminder of his boundless, limitless heart, and of my own renewed, unwavering commitment to absolute honesty, no matter how daunting the truth may be. It's a reminder that true wealth isn't in what you have, but in the depth of your connections. So, if there's one thing, just one single, burning thing, I want you to truly absorb from this rambling tale of an old man's folly, and a son's miraculous love, it's this. Don't wait. Please don't wait. Don't wait for a crisis to force your hand. Don't wait for a lie to unravel, exposing everything in a painful burst. Talk to your loved ones. Talk to your parents, your children, your siblings, your dearest friends. Speak your truth honestly, openly, sincerely. Share your worries, your deepest fears, your most ambitious hopes. Because in that open, vulnerable exchange, that's where true strength blossoms. That's where you'll find the kind of love that can move mountains, that can heal any hurt, and that will truly, truly shock you with its unfathomable power and beauty. Go on now, don't hesitate, pick up the phone, send that heartfelt message you've been putting off. Or better yet, if they're near, go hug them tight, squeeze them fiercely. Look into their eyes and tell them what's really in your heart, unreservedly. You might just be astonished by what you discover about them and about yourself. And trust me, with every fiber of my being, the peace that comes from a life lived in truth, surrounded by genuine, unconditional love, that, my friends, is the greatest pension of all. It's the purest, most enduring wealth you'll ever accumulate. Absolutely priceless. A treasure beyond measure. Thank you truly for listening to an old man's story and for letting him finally share the truth that set him free.